The Detroit Lions are one of the biggest stories in all of North American sports right now. They were the laughingstock of the NFL for a long time, basically as long as I've been alive, and now they're 10 and 1. Last season they went to the NFC Championship. I don't know if there's a team in football that's going to be able to beat the Lions when it's said and done. Their one loss was to the Bucks, which was at the beginning of the season. I think it was week 2, guys. Feels like forever ago. And since then, though, they won every single game. They're getting it done on both sides of the ball. And I'm definitely guilty of doubting the Lions. I'm a Colts fan, so obviously I'm biased. Obviously, I expected us to win that game, or more so, I wanted us to win that game. But I looked at the numbers and I saw that the Lions just shut down every single quarterback that they played. And I thought it'd be different for us, but it wasn't. Anthony Richardson struggled, didn't even have a touchdown. The Colts didn't score at all, yet alone throwing, but on the ground as well. We kicked 2 field goals. We didn't score in the second half. The Lions, they sent pressure at us, and they're without Aiden Hutchinson. Darius Smith's a good player, but he's not Aiden Hutchinson. Hutchinson was looking like not just the defensive player of the year, looked like he might even be in the MVP conversation. I don't know the last time a defensive player won MVP, but it looked like Hutchinson had a legit chance. And ever since he's gone out, they've just continued to rev it up and get after the quarterback. But their secondary has been impressive as well. They've got a great safety in Kirby Joseph. Of course, they've got Brian Branch, one of the more physical nickels in football, former second-round pick out of Alabama. I really liked watching his tape back in the day, and I thought he'd be a for sure first-round pick, but the Lions ended up trading up to get him. But this Detroit defense, led by Aaron Glenn, they just dial up pressure at the right time. It seemed like whenever the Colts started to get some momentum going, the Lions had an answer. Offensively, Detroit, they average about 33 points per game. The Colts held them to 24. The second half, the Lions only scored 10 points, which goes to show how much firepower they have. They only scored 10 points. 10 points is not that bad in a half, but the Colts, they were able to limit them. But it was the second quarter. No team's better in the second quarter than the Lions. 14 points to our 3. That's really what this game came down to. But it's definitely one of those ones where you look back on it and you say that, hey, look, the Lions, they're going to win the Super Bowl this season. They've got as good of a chance as anyone. At least we kept it kind of competitive. I didn't expect the Colts to realistically win that game. I was hopeful because we needed it for our playoff chances. But the Lions, it was just one of those games where they go ahead, they finish off their sweep of the AFC South Division, and now they're on to Thanksgiving Day, which is going to be at home against the Chicago Bears. I'm going to pull up their schedule. They're looking to go to 11 and 1. And the thing with the Lions is normally when you're 10 and 1, you're coasting to first place in your division, but they're not because the Vikings are coming in at 9 and 2, which is funny because they're the 5th seed. It's only because teams that have the division are put over them because they get that home field game. If the playoffs started today, we would have the Falcons and the Vikings in Atlanta, which is funny. A 6-5 team against a 9-2 team. But if the Lions lose one more game and the Vikings win, they're tied for first. Now, technically, the Lions have the tiebreaker because they beat the Vikings, which was a crazy game back in Week 7, 31-29. It was a game-winning field goal. But these two teams will play Week 18 at home, Ford Field, of course, these two teams in Detroit. So that's going to be a big-time game. It's probably going to be the primetime game. I think those two teams more than likely could be playing for the division. And the Vikings, they've been winning a lot of close games. Their offense hasn't been that impressive. The Lions, they've been in close games. I mean, they were in a close game against the Packers. They were in a close game against the Texans. But then they blow out the Jags, 52-6. The Titans, 52-14. The Cowboys, 47-9. The Colts, 24-6. I mean, it kind of felt like these two teams were just completely different, and they are, but it wasn't that far off, but it was just because of the Colts defense. But offensively, the Colts could not do anything against this Lions defense. And the Lions, they're going to score 30 points a lot of games, but they also can win games with their defense, which they've done plenty of times this season as well. They've scored a lot, but when their defense needs to, like against the Texans, they can go out there and they can get big-time stops. And, I mean, C.J. Stroud looked just completely discombobulated in that one. And I expect this Lions defense to wreak havoc Thursday against the Bears. Caleb Williams is coming off of maybe the best game of his young NFL career, but he's in for a rude awakening when he sees what Aaron Glenn's going to be able to dial up. I mean, it's kind of pathetic being a Colts fan because Glenn literally was sitting down on the bench with one leg up, just completely over his leg, just relaxing, realizing that he won the game. Glenn will certainly be a head coach within the next couple of seasons. Ben Johnson was already interviewed by multiple teams to be a head coach. I believe the Seahawks, the Panthers. Wish we were live so you guys could help me out. The Commanders, right? as multiple teams wanted Ben Johnson to be their head coach, but he wisely stayed in Detroit because there's more of an opportunity. You're with a loaded offense. You're with a loaded team and a great culture. I've been saying this for years. The Lions have the best culture. I actually started making the Lions videos back when you guys were under 500, which was, what was that, 2022, I want to say, where you guys were under 500 and then you got hot and nearly pushed for the playoffs late in the season. Pretty remarkable to think about. The Lions, where they came from, to Dan Campbell, of course, getting that first win, and then now legitimately being 10-1. But I envisioned this. I really did. I know it's easy to say that now that it's happened. But when I started covering the Lions, I saw what they were doing. Brad Holmes building the roster, Dan Campbell with the culture, and then they just kept adding in pieces. Jahmyr Gibbs, Sam Laporta, Brian Branch. They just got more talented by the year, and now here we are. But I think what it comes down to for the Lions is going to be Jared Goff. How far can he take this team? We saw he took them to the NFC Championship last year. We saw him go to a Super Bowl with the Rams against the Patriots. But now we realize that, hey, look, Goff, we've seen the best of him. We've seen the worst of him. Can he get it done in a big moment? And there's really no reason for me to think that he can't, just because Goff this season, he's put up MVP numbers. I mean, even with that one game against the Texans, I think he was it 4 or 5 picks. I don't remember entirely, but even with that game, I mean, we're talking about 20 touchdowns and 9 interceptions, 57.7 QBR, 2,761 yards. Goff, he gets rid of the ball quickly. He's also just put his playmakers in a position to where they can catch and run. The Lions are deadly after the catch. And of course, Goff is playing the quarterback position like you're supposed to. He's just managing the game. He's calling audibles, the Lions motion a ton, and he killed a lot of plays against the Colts. He saw something he liked, that he could attack in the Colts defense, and it resulted in a big way. I've been impressed with Goff. He doesn't have to be Lamar Jackson. He doesn't have to be Patrick Mahomes or Joe Burrow. He just has to be the Jared Goff that he's been the past couple of seasons, and when the game's on the line, he's got to make those plays. Brock Purdy made the plays, unfortunately, in the NFC Championship, and now it's time for Jared Goff to do that. But this is a huge opportunity for Detroit because the Niners, I don't see them making the playoffs. I certainly don't see them beating the Bills in Orchard Park on Sunday, which is great news for the Lions. Even though the Lions and Niners are completely different teams, if the Niners got hot at the end of the season, like nobody would want to see them. So the Eagles is going to be probably the biggest test for the Lions this season. They play the Ravens this week, which is going to be fun. The Seahawks always play the Lions well. That's going to be tough. The Vikings is going to be tough. The Packers, like teams in the division. But when I look at the Lions, I just look at the Lions and then another tier, which would be the Eagles, and then another tier. I'd probably put the Vikings. You know what? I'd put the Vikings in the same tier as the Eagles. So Lions is a tier, Eagles and Vikings is a tier, and then my next tier, I would put the Packers. I would put probably the Packers. I think are certainly better than the Seahawks. So probably like Packers. And then I'd put another tier, and then I would go with like the Seahawks, the Falcons, and the Commanders. I think that makes sense. You guys might disagree. Feel free to down below in the comments. But clearly the point I'm trying to make is the Lions are the best team, not only in the NFC, but the best team in the NFL. The Lions can win games in a shootout, or they can win it with their defense, as they did against the Colts. I know the Colts are more than likely aren't going to the playoffs. They're certainly not a top team in the AFC. But the point being is that the Lions, they've got the best, most well-balanced team in football, and I completely stand on that.